Well, thank you everyone for joining the session today on easing the burden of CMMC and Nist 800-171 compliance. We do have a lot of folks that are still joining the session, and we greatly appreciate you taking the time to join us today on this. Just a note in terms of a few house cleaning items or logistics. All those who have either registered or are participating in the session today will receive copies of this content along with a link to the recording of this webinar as well. We also will be making a couple of offers through some polling processes. So we would ask that you certainly react to those polls when we launch them for you today. But again, there's obviously a heightened interest in this subject, as I think we're getting closer and closer to the actual CMMC implementation. And of course, the even heightened more requirement now to make sure that you're compliant with Nist 800-171. And we're going to show you some ways where we'll update you on some activities that are taking place. And then we're going to show you some ways that you can utilize some tools, either yourself directly through SureShield or maybe through partners that you work with to help you in your activities to help meet the compliance requirements and, more importantly, keep your organization safe and secure. So we'll talk a little bit about this increased demand, things that are going on, what the current compliance requirements are as it relates to Nist and CMMC. Many of you are already familiar with the changes. I won't spend a lot of time on that, but we'll just kind of reiterate what those changes are and what they mean. And really, what remains and what should your company be doing today, right now, to protect yourself and also make sure that you keep any agreements that you have solid and in good requirements and meet the requirements that the government is going to have for you. We're also going to talk a little bit how we've adapted to help meet those needs. And then we'll go into a bit of a platform demonstration to show you some of the tools that we have. One that will provide you 100% compliance with the assessment process, as well as some other tools that will help guarantee and assure that you not only are protecting yourself, most importantly, but are also meeting some of the a number of the control requirements, specifically as it relates to protecting critical data and making sure that you're doing a good evaluation of your overall IT infrastructure to make sure you do not have any vulnerabilities and holes in there. And we'll show you some products and tools that can help you with that. And then we'll go ahead and take questions and make some offers to you as well. So a couple of things I also want to reiterate. While the session is focused primarily around the Nist and CMMC and the DoD requirements, we know many of you, obviously, if you're here, either work quite a bit with the government, with the DoD, but there's also a lot of providers in here that have other business beyond this and even are making decisions about, is it worth their economic effort to continue in order, depending upon the kind of agreements that you have in place. While we'll focus a good portion of the session and the tools that we have in helping you meet these needs, I want to just reiterate that many of you obviously have security needs in other areas, have compliance requirements in other areas, and we're going to show you how SureShield and the tools that we have can help you meet pretty much any of the compliance requirements you have, the security requirements you have, and ultimately meet and help you assure a good overall cyber hygiene within your organization to meet any of these requirements. So just a bit in terms of why I think there's even a continued I won't say new interest, but a heightened interest in making sure that we're understanding what needs to be done today and into the future, is obviously the Ukraine war has heightened the need for increased cyber hygiene. We know that there's been plenty of warnings from CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, that's telling us, if you go to the website, you'll see the shields up warning, basically saying, be ready and make sure that you have proper processes in place, because we're going to get attacked, and we are getting attacked right now from Russia, from Iran, from North Korea, from a lot of other hostile nations. And because of obviously this more, this new event in Ukraine, it's even put that more on heightened awareness, and there's been more of these types of activities taking place. So we're being told, obviously, to be prepared. And as such, because obviously our defense system is so critically important to us from a protection standpoint as well, you can expect that the government and the DoD is going to make sure that they're even heightening their requirements for meeting the current Nist 800-171 requirements. You as a provider or a subcontractor may be seeing this quite a bit from your primes. You may be seeing with the renewal of agreements or new agreements that are coming out, they're more heightened in telling you that you're going to need to complete an assessment, and you're going to need to submit those scores in your system security plans and the likes to the SPRS. So we're expecting that that will continue to increase. Now, with the last meetings, as you know, there's about 300,000 providers in the defense industrial base, and they're expecting that about 140,000 of those, roughly, will need to comply in what they call a level 1. These are companies that are servicing but aren't necessarily working with any what you would call significant CUI data. And we'll go into some of these levels just briefly as a refresher. But probably over 100,000 of you that are in this and above are going to be at a level 2 or a level 3. That means that you're working with CUI data. You're going to need to demonstrate that you have good processes in place to protect that. And in the last update meetings, the DoD had indicated that while they had initially said there might be some bifurcation of the level 2 in terms of how you as a provider will need to comply, either through a self-attestment process or through an audit, they're expecting that most will probably need to go through that C3PAO audit. So as such, it's important and extremely important that you have kind of your ducks in a row and you know where you stand and you're ready for that when that time comes. They're going to, as we said, continue to enforce the Nist 800-171 requirements. They're going to expect a greater, higher level of sign-off than has been done in the past. Again, the changes that were made that we'll talk about briefly all recognize that the Nist 800-171 process is very solid. It's following that process and making sure that you are documenting and proving that you're following that process. If so, and you are doing that, you will have good practices, you'll have good cyber hygiene, you'll help meet requirements. And more importantly, you need to continue to do that on a regular basis. This is not a singular activity because there's always new vulnerabilities being introduced into environments. There's always new things that can change your own infrastructure. And so it's important that you always are kind of looking at those processes. We do know that the POAM, the POAM will be limited going forward, meaning that they're going to have less numbers of controls that you're going to be able to put on a POAM. We haven't seen yet what those are, but you can be assured that less of the controls associated with level 2 and 800-171 will not be allowing you to put them on a POAM. And so you're probably best to get your initial assessments done now and understand where you have issues, and do your best to actually get those taken care of right now as easily as you can. And of course, it's advised all in the DIB do vulnerability assessments. Now, you may have a provider that's helping do that for you. If you're working with an MSP, I would encourage you and make sure that you're asking them if you're not sure. Are you doing regular vulnerability assessments on my environment? Are you providing me with information on where we might have issues? And are you helping me understand how we go about remediating those? Very critical, not more critical from a protection of your company standpoint, even more so than meeting these requirement processes. But as such, you need to be doing those types of processes. So today, as we know, the requirement is all providers in the DIB are required to be conducting a NIST 800-171 assessment, and they're supposed to be submitting that to the SPRS. You're expected, as part of that, to provide your plan of action and milestone requirements. If you indeed have not met all of those controls, if you've not implemented all the controls, and as I mentioned earlier, there'll be fewer of those down the road, and the time in which you'll need to implement them is going to be reduced. And then you're also going to need to submit your system security plan as a part of that process. We're going to show you through SureShield how we simplify and make that easy for you to bring all of that together and have everything you need to, first of all, understand where you stand, put corrective action plans in place, and then have all the information, the documentation you need to submit this information. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but as you know, last year they modified and they made a change to the structure. There were originally 5 levels of what they're calling CMMC Maturity. They've reduced those to 3. This makes it a lot more, I would say, easy and straightforward. The issues in the past were not necessarily with meeting controls. They were actually with complying with those controls and proving that you're complying with those controls. And so they've reduced the levels from 5 to 3. At a level 2, you are specifically doing exactly what you would be doing with the NIST 800-171. The only thing that has changed in that whole process really are how you answer the questions, primarily, and basically what they call the attributes. So they have different numbering systems. What they did is actually went ahead and combined the old CMMC numbering with the current NIST numbering, and they're basically brought those together. So if you're at a level 2, you're essentially doing a NIST 800-171. Those of you that are not working with highly classified information will need to be complying at a level 1. Those are 17 practices. And again, at a level 1, you will be able to self-attest. And at a level 2, most likely you're going to need to go through an audit. So what hasn't changed and what should you be doing as an organization? There is news, as many of you may know, that next week there is going to be another CMMC AB town hall meeting. That is next Tuesday. We should expect to hear some new updates, hopefully in terms of where they're at in approving the new rule and approving some of the, what I would call, scoring methodologies. There's more and more companies that are getting C3PAO, I guess, called certified. So there'll be more out there ready to actually conduct and do these audits of your organization. They have indicated that even though CMMC has not been obviously implemented, that there are going to be incentives for those of you that do go through an audit process that will put you, just think about it, in a better position and at a higher level in terms of how they view your overall cyber security and cyber hygiene. And of course, there's going to be the requirement to continue to submit the NIST 800-171 score to the SPRS. As part of that, right now, you're required to do that yearly, and you need to have updated and update and create your POAM and SSP processes. So I'm going to take, just before we go on to the next components, a very brief poll to ask the folks here, one, whether you have actually to date conducted a NIST 800-171 assessment, and also if so or if not, when do you plan on trying to get your organization compliant? We'll just give this about a minute, and I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll now. Please go ahead and answer the questions. Since we do have quite a few folks that have joined this session, I'm just going to give you a little extra time to answer. And while you're doing that, I will also, continue on and speak a little bit about, what continues to not have changed and what you should be doing. Obviously, one of those components is to make sure that you determine your maturity level. And the maturity level has to do generally with whether you are working with controlled unclassified information. If you are, you will be at a minimum of a level 2. And you'll most likely need to have a C3PAO audit done at that time. So it's important that you locate and evaluate your CUI information. The controls that I'm pointing out are the Nist 3.01.03, .19, and .22 requirements are part of that. And again, we'll show you a little bit how we can help you with that. And of course, the cyber hardening processes will continue to be an ongoing requirement. As I mentioned, you should be having regular security vulnerability scans done in your environment, whether you're doing them within your own IT department in your company, whether your provider is doing that for you. If you're not sure, you should be asking them, and also be asking them what their findings are and what the recommended remediations are for that. So I see of those who have responded, about 30% of you have conducted your assessment. Many of you haven't, so you should actually be ready to get going on that process. And a large majority are planning to get this done within this next year. So thank you for answering those questions for us. I'm going to just pause here and go ahead and continue on. So again, part of the processes of remediation, one of the other controls is the Nist 3.11.02 and 03 that tells you need to be conducting regular scans and remediating vulnerabilities that are identified in that environment. And we can show you how to do that. So how have we at SureShield worked to help with this and help you meet the upcoming requirements and those current requirements? And just to note, we work on a variety of different levels. We have a lot of companies that work with us directly that have some resources in place to actually do what they need to do. We have software that will help you with that. But we also work with a lot of partners that are providing additional services, and they're leveraging these tools to make it more efficient for themselves and for the customers that they're servicing. So we have already gone ahead and aligned the compliance assessment tools to meet the CMMC level 1, level 2, and level 3 requirements. And as such, stating that, going at and doing the things you need to do now for your Nist 800-171 compliance, because we've built all the crosswalks into this, you only need to be doing that for the most part, and then we can basically crosswalk all the information that you need that will be required down the line when this rule gets implemented. And there is really no expectation that this rule is going to be changed any further. So you can be assured that you've got a way to meet current requirements and future requirements. As part of our assessment tool process, we add a lot of supplemental guidance content to really help simplify how you go about complying with these different controls. You'll see that we provide you with policies that are required. We help that you can modify to your own organization. We give you a lot of direction and a lot of information on helping understand the control and what you need to do to help implement that control and safely say that you've implemented it, and then provide you means to actually house all of that information, have all the supporting communications and documentations around that. We have further enhanced the system security scanning tools we'll talk about to conform to the CISA known exploits. As many of you know, as we talked about with CISA, they're releasing almost now, I see it on a weekly basis, new what they call CISA known exploits. And these are vulnerabilities that they've identified that they are telling any government related agency, they're giving them very specific guidelines and timelines on when they need to get those exploits fixed. And they are highly encouraging the commercial community to do the same. And so we can actually call out with our scanning tools those subset of known exploits and help direct you to what ones might exist in your environment and how to go about fixing those. And then we've also helped to completely automate the system security plan process. And I'll show that to you when we go into some of the overview of some of the tools that we have. But part of your assessment process is something that needs to be part of the system security plan. We've added some, what I would call, web forms that will help you complete all the pieces you need to successfully submit that information, that system security plan, to the SPRS. So what are some of those solutions? And again, specifically around the CMMC areas, we'll show you in Nist how we can help provide that, but I'm also going to touch briefly on how we're helping in general with all of your compliance and security requirements. So as I mentioned, we can help. We've already built the 800-171. We've got you all the frameworks, and we've got all the crosswalks built in. So you can conduct one assessment and harmonize that across both environments. You can actually harmonize that across several environments, and I'll point that out briefly on the next slide. We provide continuous vulnerability scanning tools that can be used yourself, by your MSPs, by your providers that are working with you. They are super easy to implement. They give you very good specific information on where you have your highest risks, and they tell you specifically how to fix that information. And of course, we output all the required documentation you need, and we have software tools that can help identify critical data in your environment. And again, sometimes there's organizations that may not know if they have CUI. Oftentimes, you may have documents that you don't know that the markings are there, and we can actually help you identify very quickly whether you have that information, where that resides, and give some guidance on how to properly set things up to protect that information. You want to have it secured in an area that really has limited access to you. And we do those under the auspices of a couple of different product solutions. One is our ComplyShield tool. That is the assessment tool that I'm going to show you that allows you to conduct any and all compliance-related assessments, but specifically for the purposes of today, we're going to show you for Nist and CMMC. We have Security Shield, which is a continuous vulnerability scanning tool. We have the Security Shield DLP, which is really a data loss protection tool that can help identify CUI data. And we also have a solution, we didn't touch on this too much, called Integrity Shield, but basically Integrity Shield helps identify and make sure you're not working with any sanctioned or banned vendors. And specifically, this comes to more light now, not only with the Ukraine issue, because we put a lot of Russian people, companies, organizations on a sanctions and exclusion list, but there's also a number of banned Chinese telecommunication companies that anyone who's working with the federal government, regardless of whether it's just tangentially, you are not allowed to be having that kind of telecommunication technology in your environment. It's forbidden through what they call the McCain Act. And we have solutions that can actually help identify whether you have those technologies in your environment, whether your vendors have that in their environment, and to allow you to identify that and remediate and get that out so you don't put yourself in a bad compliance issue. I do also want to point, as I mentioned, our compliance tools, while we're focusing on CMMC and Nist today, we have over 31 different compliance frameworks around a variety of different domains. We have finance ones, so any of you that are dealing with credit cards are familiar with PCI. We have all the Nist, the various Nist security frameworks. We have the ISO 27001. In healthcare, we have HIPAA. I'll kind of show you that a little bit in our demo site. An organization that's dealing with CMMC, Nist, and HIPAA at the same time. And of course, several others. And we have done the work to actually crosswalk all of these. So again, many of the controls related to different compliance or security frameworks are very similar, meaning why should I conduct a Nist assessment when and do another HIPAA assessment when I know, let's just say 20% of what I'm doing relates to both. So we have ways in which we can actually crosswalk data to limit your effort and to actually make it more efficient for you as well. So I'm going to pause here. We're going to go in and just provide a brief overview of the platform and the solutions that we have. And then we'll wind up. We will go ahead and take questions from the audience. And we will also be making some offers for solutions. So I'm coming in to the SureShield platform right now. And as I mentioned, I'm looking at a customer right now, a demo customer. And this particular customer has a couple of our solutions implemented for them. So just a note, what comes into your dashboard if you're working with us is only relevant to those modules or those services that you have asked us to turn on for you. And again, as I mentioned, we do this for partners who manage this for multiple clients, and we do this a lot with folks who are doing this directly. A lot of companies want to at least get in and do that initial assessment, keeping in mind that that assessment is something that should be continuous and ongoing. So in this view, I'm getting a dashboard view, and each one of these panels represents a couple of different things. So in this case, this one is more related to compliance. I can see that I'm looking at and managing over 303 different controls. I'll explain that to you when I go into this briefly. Again, within those controls, each one of those has specific policies that are related to those. Many controls or policies have multiple controls that relate to them. And I'll show you how you could actually look at data from a policy perspective to see where you're compliant and non-compliant. Also, how you can leverage policies that we have that meet these different domain requirements, how you can modify them, update them, edit them for your own specific need. There's workflow that's built in. A lot of tools that I've seen or heard out there do not allow you to actually share work with others. In the SureShield case, we allow that. So if you're asking someone to help you with an auditing process, you may have your IT folks that need to answer questions. You may have folks that are in charge of your environment of care that need to answer questions. You can assign work and see where that all lies. These other tiles relate to this particular demo site has actually also implemented our scanning tool. And they're doing regular scans of their environment to see where they may have issues, where they may have vulnerabilities, and what they need to do to fix those. So these are different views into how you can look at that information. In this case, we have, in this particular customer demo, there's 273 host assets. There's 3,000 services running on it. Hopefully you will not see something like this. There's over 10,000 different vulnerabilities. And as I mentioned before, we've even broken those down to help you understand what those CISA known exploit vulnerabilities are. And we will also help you understand if new hosts have been introduced into the environment that have not been managed. So we initially do a discovery of all your assets, and you can set up how you want to go about scanning those in the case. If a new one is added, we can give you some warnings that something's been added and might need to be addressed. But let's go into the compliance component first. So I'm clicked on this tile, and you'll notice at first it's showing me all the different, what I would say, controls that I'm managing in this environment. So in this customer demo, they're not only dealing with Nist 800, 171, and CMMC v2, but they also have customers, or they're having requirements to meet HIPAA security and privacy policies. So that 303 is just a combination of the totals of all those controls. Keeping in mind, again, with Nist and CMMC, those controls are exactly the same. So when you are answering a Nist, because that's what you need to be doing right now, you'll know that you can actually crosswalk all of that data to the CMMC. And over on the right-hand side, then we give you a number of different ways to easily filter the data and the information that you want to filter. So let's say I just wanted to look at the Nist controls. You'll see all it's doing is showing me those. And then I even have other types of filtering criteria. Maybe I just want to look at access controls that are related to that particular Nist process. And again, it will filter those down for you. It will show you, again, what the status is of those. I've heard of solutions that require you to go through the entire process before they will give you any types of information or reports. In our case, it's a continuous process. So if you haven't answered questions, it will show that those responses haven't been answered. You can even filter on those as well. If I just want to look at my unanswered responses, those that I've answered compliant, all of that. And again, we'll give you that view into where you stand today, not waiting days or months or sometimes many months because you haven't gotten it all done to know where you're at. When it comes to answering a question, it's as simple as actually just clicking on this particular link. And again, you'll see it will bring you into information on that particular question, the appropriate responses to those questions based on those domains. And again, as I mentioned, we provide a lot of information and guidance on how to understand, review this information, and appropriately answer the question, as well as to provide the supporting evidence as to how you meet those requirements. So those include things like guidance and best practices, implementation guidance, the policies and procedures, supplemental guidance, the supporting evidences that you may need to have for that, and then even questions that you could be surveying and asking to help you understand whether you're meeting those requirements. And as such, you also have the ability to add any of your comments regarding this, as well as upload your supporting evidence to this. And again, is this particularly when you start going through an audit, if you're going through a C3PAO audit, if they're answering something is implemented, they're going to want to have the proof that that's been implemented. And you should be doing that as well for your NIST 800-171 process. Now, because we're a continuous tool, anytime you update this information, there will always be a response history. So you can see there's been different times and different responses that I provided, and all of that information will be housed so that you always, at any given point in time, will be able to stop and take a look and see how you're performing at any given point in time. There's also workflow tools built into this. As I mentioned, I'm just going to touch on them briefly. So let's just say I wanted to assign these access controls out to someone. I could simply click here and say either I want to assign this to someone within my organization, or we even have the ability for you to request responses for someone outside of the organization. So that will create a secure web form that will ask them specifically to answer whatever question you've provided, as well as provide the proof that you're asking them for. So easy workflow built into these, which a lot of the compliance tools out there do not have. I'm going to come back briefly to just show you a view of this from the policy perspective, and then I'm going to just show you some of the reports that you can get out of the system as well. So again, if I wanted to look at the policy view of this, again, I could break this down. So you'll see there's 24 HIPAA related policies, there's 16 NIST, and there's 14 CMMC level 2 because we've implemented it at that level. If I just wanted to see the NIST policies, since we have gone in and begun to answer some of these questions, you can see that it's indicating that my control compliance status as such is non-compliance, because as it relates to my access controls, there are 22 controls that relate to this, and there's 2 of these that are not compliant. So I could even very quickly click into those and see which ones those are. And you can see in this case, they're considered non-compliant because they're right now being addressed with an SSP and a POAM. Once that has been done and satisfied, you would come back and you would change these to implement it. I'll show you just briefly how you can actually, one of the methodologies of getting at that policy, these all get customized to your particular organization. So this is going to go ahead and open up that policy. You'll notice that in this customer demo, it's configured to the name of that organization. Here, this little plus bar shows me all the controls that are related to that policy. And then you'll also know that you have the ability to upload your own if you have one. You can edit this, you can download it and modify it and bring it back in. The beauty is that these are always tied to the controls, and there'll always be a revision history in here as well. So if you've made any changes to that, that revision history will be documented as well. So obviously, working and doing an assessment and getting a picture from where you're at, regardless of whether you've begun this process at all or not, is extremely important. And what we provide then to you are a lot of ways and tools that allow you to look and see where you stand. So I'm going to a compliance manager report. You'll see I can run different things like my reports on compliance. In this case, I would go in and pick what is it that I want to look at. So do I want to look at my HIPAA compliance? Do I want to look at my CMMC? Do I want to look at my Nist compliance? A lot of different reports that can be run, that can be shared to show you how you are performing. Now, for those, again, that are part of the defense and industrial base and have to submit that information, you'll see that we provide the 3 reports that need to go to the SPRS as part of that process. One of those is the assessment score. So we've run based upon the answers to those controls. Each one has a weighted value and an assigned score, and it will give you a real-time view as to where you stand from an aggregate compliance score at any given point in time. So you see at the current point of this particular assessment, I'm at a score of 70. If I were to go in and make changes and answer things that were implemented, it's going to change those scores. We've also, as I mentioned, fully automated the whole SSP. So you'll notice when I run this, it's going to take not just the control information that's required, but you'll also see it'll give you the system security plan, the name of the organization, when this document has been revised, who are required for approvals, the system environments of operation, your network architecture diagrams that are required as part of this, your system boundary diagrams, your system interconnections that are required, and then all the practices and where you stand on control. Once you have this, you simply package this up and have this ready to submit. And how we do that is we give you, as I said, is some ways to actually go into some web forms that allow you to input that supporting additional documentation that's required for this particular assessment. So we streamline and really make this whole process super simple for you. And we've had a lot of organizations that have signed up specifically just to be able to start the process of doing the compliance assessment for themselves. I'm going to touch base briefly on a couple of other offerings, and then we'll wrap up and get into questions for you. So as I mentioned, in this particular customer view, we're looking at system vulnerabilities as well. And that is a requirement of making sure that you are, one of the control requirements of the assessment is that you're running regular vulnerability scans. So this shows me how I'm performing. Again, what I might be looking at on different assets. I can go at these from what I would call a macro level. So in this case, maybe I wanted to just drill down and see what are my most very high critical assets that have issues, or the ones that are critical. So in this case, it's only going to pull up one for me. If I were to look at that particular IP, it's then going to show me, because I'm running these vulnerabilities over time, how I'm performing over time with that, where those vulnerabilities are, what those vulnerabilities are, what assets, what's running on those, and then more importantly, how do I go about remediating those issues, remediation guidance. And then I can run these again and see how I'm performing and making sure that I'm reducing the risk in my environment. Again, once you've done these, you have regular reports that you can run. that will show you specifically, and they can be used, for management purposes, for things like, help me understand, sometimes we can't get at every single vulnerability we have. Well, show me what impact it would have if I just were looking at my top 20 remediations. And while we're doing that, I'll just point out from an operational process, how this is done is we have leveraged what I would call a gold standard scanning utility provided through Rapid7. And what we've done is we've web-enabled it. We've made it much more easy to implement. You simply basically go and install a scanner that you can download. It runs off of a Windows machine. It will go out and identify all of the IPs internally and externally, and then it will run those scans and tell you where you have issues. And then you can also schedule those as to when, how often, what you want to run in any given point in time. So in this example, I've actually gone in and run a top 20 remediation report, and it's showing me if I were to apply 20 remediations, the top 20 remediations, they'd be applied to 169 of those hosts, and they'd actually take care of over 90% of the vulnerabilities that I have in my organization. And it will show you kind of a time series of what impact that has as you continue to adapt more and more of these items, right? It will even give you some time degrees as to what it will take to do those remediations. And ours are based upon doing them one at a time. A lot of people have what I would call remediation tools that can make these things that much more quick, but it will give you those kind of reports. They're great to share with management to say, hey, if we do this, we're going to improve our risk profile. And ultimately, that is what the most important requirement is protecting your environment. So I'm going to touch briefly on one more solution very briefly, and then we're going to go ahead and wrap up and take questions. Let me get out of here. And just as I mentioned before, many of you may not know whether you have CUI in your environment. Many of you do. And even if you do, you're going to want to know where that resides. And so through our security DLP, this is our solution that allows you to, first of all, go out and identify critical data you may have, and then it will help you understand where that resides, what kind of data files and where they reside. Are they Dropbox? Are they Outlook, OneDrives? Are they in Word files and the likes? And then for those who have proper controls, they allow you to write rules to prevent the exfiltration of that data. And this is a critical requirement for Nist and CMMC as well. If you have that information, you need to demonstrate that you have it protected and you have processes that will prevent the leakage of that information. So in this case, I'm going ahead and looking into this information. And again, this product can identify lots of different types of data, critical data in your environment. And so because we've opened it up for a lot of other things, I might just say I want to just look at my CUI related data, and it will help me understand what those are, what devices those reside on, and then help me understand how I can go about doing protection on those. So again, to just summarize, with the solution sets that we have, we can help you simplify the whole assessment process, first of all, and help you do 100% of that process. Then meeting a number of the control requirements, we have solutions like our scanning utilities, our integrity management utilities, our SureShield DLP that will help you protect that critical data, not just for your government business, but for any business, and do it in a form and fashion that's really relatively simple and easy for you to do. So I'm sure that we have a number of questions. I'm going to go ahead and kind of summarize and wrap up here. And then we're going to, as we do that and begin to take questions, we're going to take another poll. We are opening this up again for folks that many have opted that they would like to take advantage of trialing out these solutions. We offer you the ability to trial them so you can get a flavor for how they can help meet your needs. And then for those, and many of those that have trialed have gone on to become customers of ours, either directly or through the partners that we work with or they're working with. So I would encourage you, if you have an MSP provider, to bring this to them as well as something that might help in their business. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll. And please, if you are interested in our solutions and solutions that can help you, please go ahead and respond to the poll, and also any and all of the product offerings that you may have some interest in. And we'll keep this open because, again, we do have a lot of folks that are participating in this session. We'll keep this open through the end of the session, but we'll go ahead on in to finish this up and answer as many questions as we can. So what we hope we can help you with is lowering your overall security risk and liabilities, make it easier to faster identify the gaps you may have and remediate those, and really help protect your business with the government as well as with any other organization you're working with. Again, we'll hear more information next week on where the AB is at with the CMMC overall rule approval, but it is moving forward. We'll get updates on that. The new assessment levels are in place. You can expect that when you see new agreements that come out or your re-upping agreements, there's going to be even more requirement for you to submit those Nist scores and validate and show that you've done these assessments, just because we all know that the requirements and the hostile environments that we're in right now are going to get heightened. And really, you can leverage our technology to simplify that process, to help meet your compliance requirements. And as I mentioned as well, it's a state of continued readiness. You will always have issues or always have things that need to be done to reevaluate and look at your environment. And we can help you, give you a snapshot at any given point in time of how you're doing, how you're performing, meeting your compliance requirements, and most importantly, protecting your business. So we'll go ahead and open that to questions. We still have the poll open for those of you who would like to trial the products. I see a number of you that are saying maybe later. Just a note, you will get a follow-up to this with information on the content. The content in this presentation will be sent to you. We will also be sending you the webinar presentation. If you want to reach out to us, you can email us. You can visit our website. And we do have regular updates. We're regularly updating both our Twitter and our LinkedIn accounts. So please, if you want more information on the latest in cyber news and issues and how SureShield might be able to help, please come follow us on LinkedIn on our SureShield LinkedIn site. So I'm going to go ahead and pause here. As I said, we still have the poll open. And please go ahead and continue to answer for those who are here. We really appreciate it. Looks like we had a lot of folks that are still with us. We want to go ahead and answer any questions. And Randy and Chandi, I'm going to open it up. I've got my colleagues, our support folks, our CTO who are on here with me, who have been kind of moderating the Q&A. And if there's any that you guys have noted that are specifically important, we want to just reiterate, please let me know. I'll go ahead and answer. There's a question here. What's a subscription model for ComplyShield? It's an annual subscription for ComplyShield based upon the number of frameworks that you have gone ahead and implemented. So we consider CMMC and Nist one framework. So it's an annual subscription, but it can be paid monthly. It's very economical, roughly about $1,500 a year. So super economical. A lot of folks are using this to get their baselines done, to understand their gaps and to use this as a continuous tool. We found a lot of other folks are then adding our security and vulnerability scanning solution. And that is typically based upon the number of assets and IPs that need to be scanned on a monthly basis. And oftentimes you're not doing it every month. So if you're not doing it any month, you're only charged for the months in which you've done scan. I see a question about, do we own the products? Are we a reseller? We have a couple where I would call we're a value add, because we are adding value on top of the vulnerability and scanning solution. So we've taken a best in breed and we've added a lot more reporting. We've added more easy implementation, and we've added better remediation guidance to that particular solution. Our compliance products are our own products as well. So they're not resold. They are provided by SureShield and our platform. Chandi, if you could help answer the question about where does the collected data go to? Where is it sent?
Sure. So the data is hosted on, the whole platform is hosted on Amazon Web Services. And in the US, it's basically on the US East Coast. So it resides in that, in an encrypted format.
And we meet all the FedRAMP requirements, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So there's a question here around if a company only sells COTS, would they be subject to CMMC level 1? And the answer is I don't want to answer it specifically. If you have to do any kind of modification to your software or your product in order to bring that in, that is considered to be considered not a COTS product. But they will release other information on specifically what meets a COTS criteria and as to whether you need to meet any specific CMMC level 1, 2, or NIST 800-171 requirements. Now, there's also a question of what's considered an acceptable score. As it relates to the NIST 871, the expectation is that you're going to be at a 110. They understand right now that not everything may be there in order to do that. I would tell you, you're best to understand where you stand now, make improvements to those scores, because you'll often find there's a number of things in that gap analysis that can help you understand how to move something from a not implemented to an implemented to improve that score. And then, of course, they're going to expect with the POEM, is going to outline ultimately how you plan to meet and get to a 110 score requirement. As I mentioned earlier, they are going to reduce the number of items that can go on a POEM going forward. So while there's no specific number today, you can be certain there's going to be certain things that could say that has to be implemented or it's not going to meet the requirements. And then there's a question on the vulnerability tool. I see Chandi's answering that. We're leveraging the the Rapid7 environment. It is considered a gold standard in this, and really is doing more than just what I would call compliance scans. It's doing full-on vulnerability oversight and views. We have questions about a referral program. Please reach out to us. Yes, we've actually had quite a few folks that have begun to use our product that are servicing other suppliers and want to introduce this to them. And we've set up some referral programs for them for that. So I would ask the person asking that question to please reach out to us at SureShield or me directly, and I can help you in that process. And we'd appreciate certainly referrals. So there was a question about cost. Cost for the compliance solution, yes, is $1,500 a year for the CMMC Nist and 800-171 and CMMC level 2. So we, like I said, we package them together because you really are essentially using those one controls. Most of our organizations opt to pay for that annually. You can pay for it monthly. And then different product offerings like our security scanning solution is based upon the number of assets that are being scanned in any given month. And our DLP is a what we call a point-based solution, that endpoint solution. So, you know, not every single one of your endpoints is housing CUI data. So it's restricted to those critical endpoints that you have where you might be packaging and housing that information and putting security added security on top of it. I look at it like in my home, I do security and vulnerability scans to make sure that my windows aren't cracked, my doors are locked, and the likes. And then I have some very critical information, passports, jewelry, that I put under, you know, even further safe and lock and key. And that's what that DLP component does. So that if there were to get into you know, someone were to break in, that they are still not able to get at that data and take that data. I see a person asking about a score of 54. You know, again, I'm not an expert. I would tell you that's less than half of what is the expectation. So, you know, an advice that we might have is look at where those gaps are and see where you can do things to improve either on your own or through your providers to help you with that. And I'm going to just see if there's any other questions. And I see Chandi is answering a number of those also directly, so please. And I see others that are MSPs that are reaching out to us. We'll make a note to reach out to you. As I mentioned, we work with a number of MSPs who are leveraging these tools as well. Just trying to see if there's any open questions. And I mean, certainly, I apologize. Someone said $1,500 is not cheap. Anything that has to be spent is currently not inexpensive. I guess I would say I compare that to other solutions that we know are out there on the market and what they're charging for those. What we felt is hoping to provide a somewhat economical price for this, keeping in mind that you're also going to need to be doing this every year. If you're at a level 1, you're going to need to be submitting. So you're going to need to be updating and attesting and submitting those every year. And what we've heard from a lot of our folks is that the tool is very powerful, and yet to them, you know, pretty economical for them as well. So I see we're getting up to the last of the hour. I see a number of folks that have responded to the poll that are interested. Keep in mind that we'll be reaching out. Those of you that are interested in trial, you'll note that you will receive an opportunity to actually go into our calendar and book that time with us to get you set up. But we'll also be reaching out to you as well. And for those of you that have said maybe later, you'll get all of this information, and should you have an interest, please again reach out to us. We wish you all the best. I'd encourage you all to attend the town hall meeting next week, and we'll look forward to those of you who now have asked for us to get in touch with you, getting you set up on whatever solutions you may be interested. Again, thank you everybody for your time and your attendance. We'll go ahead and close the session.